You're more real, Lord. You're more real than the song on my tongue. Song on my tongue. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Then I say, your thoughts define me. Your thoughts, Lord. Your thoughts define me. You're inside of me, Lord. You're inside me. You are my reality. You are my reality. Here we go. Whoa. Daddy, you knew that we needed to know what a father looked like. Oh, Daddy, you knew we needed to know what a real daddy looked like. You knew this world would destroy that, but Lord, that's when you took it upon yourself. That's when you took it upon yourself. You did it yourself. You became daddy. You became daddy. You became daddy. You became daddy. And you sent your son. You sent your son. Abba, Abba. I belong. Oh, I'm yours. I've got your DNA. I've got your blood in me. Oh, I'm yours forever. I'm yours. I'm yours. I'm yours. I belong. Doesn't matter what they say. Doesn't matter what they say about me. You got a plan, and your plan is forever. And you walk with me, and you talk with me, and you tells me I am his own. Yeah. What joy we share as we tarry there. Good evening, KLM family. How's everybody doing tonight? I trust and pray that all is well with you. As y'all come in the room, say hi like we always do. Greet everyone, let them know who you are. Say hello to individuals. And hey, I'm on a new setup tonight, so y'all let me know. Can y'all hear me? Are we good? Are we good to go? Like I said, as you come in, say hello, and don't forget, go ahead and share tonight's broadcast, right? Share tonight's Bible study as we dig in. But it is good to see everybody as you kind of file into the room. Good to see you, Miss Deborah. See you, Miss Reba. Prophetess Vanita, good to see you. Miss Regina, good to have you in the room tonight. Monica, I see you. How you doing, Miss Anita? I'm glad to have everybody in the building with us tonight. The proverbial building, like we say. But yeah, just let me know. Can y'all hear me? Are we good? Okay. Y'all let me know we're good. We're good for the night. Well, I am glad and grateful that you all have chosen to jump on tonight, chosen to come in the room. And as we are getting set, and just as kind of I prepare myself, I do always want to just let you know where we are, what we have going on this week. So KLM family, it has been an amazing few weeks, right? We last Saturday, Sunday, God has been very kind and gracious to us, and he never fails to show up, right? Never fails to meet us where we are. So this coming week, though, right, we got a couple things to keep in mind. So Saturday, we've got 8 a.m. prayer in the building. Yes, we are in the building every single week at 8 a.m. And we want you to be in the building with us. We are praying, we are crying out to God, but not just are we having the opportunity to speak to him, to talk to him, but God is also talking back to us, y'all. And so this is not a time that you want to miss. If you need to hear from God, if you're looking for God to be God, if you're looking to hear something that you need, something to help you continue to move forward, then that's where we get it, right? It's cool. Don't get me wrong. We gathered on Sundays and we worship and we do that. But it is those times of intimacy with God, that conversation with him that allows him to speak to us in a very clear, concise, precise way to us. So don't want to miss Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. And then we are back again Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. We are in the building for worship. And if you're in the city, if you're in the area, if you're within driving distance, then this is somewhere that we hope that you would want to be. So come on and join us as we celebrate and worship God on Sunday. So we are KLM Church, and we are 2317 Kalamazoo Avenue Southeast, right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So listen, we are going to go ahead and jump into tonight's teaching. Now, tonight, we've been in the series on overcoming, and I know what it says on the bottom of your screen right about there. But tonight, we're going to kind of deviate a little bit from that line of thinking tonight, okay? So tonight, I want to actually talk a little bit about how we study. Y'all know I like to jump in every once in a while and have these conversations on helping us become better stewards over God's word, right? You know, I like to jump in and talk about what kind of things we can do to become better connected to God, specifically through his word. So tonight, what I want to talk about is how we do a character study. Right? How it is that we look into our biblical heroes. How is it that we kind of jump into their lives, gain more information, and figure out what it is that we need to know about who they are. All right. So as we do that tonight, I need you to share, right? If you want to know more, right? And then you know somebody else who may want to know more, then this is that opportunity. This is that opportunity to invite them in. We've talked about how to just study in general, right? We've talked about the various kinds of books and genres and things. But tonight I want to get into specifically how do we handle the people of the Bible. Now, listen to me. I'm a little we use the word character, right? But I hate the word character. Let me not say I hate it. I struggle to use the word character. And the reason why I struggle to use the word character is because oftentimes we associate characters with fiction, right? We associate a character with a play or a story or a movie. But in this case, we're actually talking about real people, right? So I struggle sometimes to use the word character because I don't want us to get into a mindset that is that they matter less than they do, right? Because they were living, breathing people. Now, sometimes we're not going to find these living, breathing people in other historical accounts, right? Because it's just like if someone was writing a history of 2020, right? Of the United States in 2020. Well, guess whose life may not be included in that, right? You may not get an historical account of what I went through in 2020 because the world is so vast. And so historically, we'll cover large subjects and we'll cover large areas or we'll cover large events, right? So sometimes we may not find extra historical information, but that doesn't mean that these weren't historically accurate, living, breathing people. right? So that's the first thing I do want to kind of stress, right? As we dive into this idea of a character study, let's remember that we're talking about real people. Now, one of the reasons why I think character studies are important, I'm kind of just setting a framework, right? I'm just setting a framework. So let me know if you're still with me, but roll with me, right? But one of the reasons why character studies are important is because it helps us to see those people accurately, right? Like, okay, I've been in church all my life, and don't get it wrong. I understand that these are our heroes, but sometimes when we're telling the stories of heroes, we can make them more heroic than they actually were. Okay, don't stone me, don't get upset, right? Don't be like, oh, I haven't lost my mind, I'm not a heretic, right? But I do understand that they are real people. So because they're real people, that they have real struggles, they have real pluses and real minuses, right? They have real strengths and they have real weaknesses. And we don't want to over highlight, right, the strengths, because sometimes when we overemphasize the strengths of the people that we see in the scripture, we sometimes get this sense that we are different from them or they are different from us. And so somehow, some way, the life that they lived, the decisions that they made may have been easier for them, right? Because they had something, an extra battery in their back, if you would, right? That would keep them on task, that would keep them loving God, that would keep them following, right? That somehow the fact that they're recorded in scripture means that they were special or protected, or there was this bubble around them. But the reality is, when we look at them and try to dig into the reality of who they are, we get to see that they may not be as special as we made them, which is not a bad thing. Hear me, that's not a bad thing, right? Because if we sometimes take them off the pedestal that we've put them on, we leave room for God to be God. What do I mean? What do I mean? Well, if we can see them as actually real people, then we get to see clearly how God interacts with real people. And that gives us a good framework for how God desires to interact with us. Right? Because if we think of them more highly than we should, right? We put them on a pedestal that they don't belong on, then we may miss the way that God wants to move, interact, and deal and build us as individuals. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I think it's important that we do character studies, why it's important to look for, to dig into who these people were, so that we can gain a sense of clarity, not just about who they are, but about who God is, was, and is, and forever will be. All right, y'all checking with me tonight? So, like I said, tonight we are talking about how we do a character study. How do we look at a biblical character? So, first step, if we're going to start to figure out how it is that we investigate the life of one of our characters, one of our biblical historical figures, how do we investigate who they are? Now, matter of fact, hold on, pause. I told y'all I struggle with the word character. Do y'all have a better word? Right? Y'all know, I like to talk. Y'all got to talk back with me, right? You got to interact with me. So I'm gonna need y'all in the comments. A better word, right? Is there something that you can think of that works better when we talk about the biblical characters? Now, if there's nothing else, then because the word is everywhere, right? Everyone uses it. So I'm not mad at the word, but if I can think of something better, Lord knows I want to. All right. So if you think of anything that works better, throw that in the chat, right? Throw that out. Throw that out. All right. So when it comes to the first step of a character study is choosing who, right? Just simply choosing what person we find interesting, what person we want to dive into, whose life do we want to gain a little more understanding about. Now, in choosing your person, it is also going to give you that's going to determine how much information you'll be able to find, right? Because some people are covered in the Bible widely, right? Some people are covered in the Bible in several different passages and several different sections that are talked about throughout the scriptures. But other people are only get small cameos, right? They only get small instances or a few verses or just a chapter. So depending on who you choose will determine how much information you'll have at your disposal, and sometimes determines the way you go about gathering that in. All right. So, like I said, I want y'all to talk back to me tonight. Tell me some people that you find interesting. Who are some of the biblical characters that you find interesting that you may know some about their lives, but you may not, right? That you'd be interested to kind of dive a little deeper into. Who are some of those people for you, right? Now, I told you all that a couple of weeks ago. I told you so that a group of friends of mine, we spent a couple of months actually kind of trying to dig into the life of David, right? David is one of our most widely known historical figures, right? And so we tried to dive into the life of David. Now, y'all know there is a ton of information on David, right? There is a ton of information on David. So now we didn't necessarily dive fully into it, right? Because it was just too much. But we did have an opportunity to dig into some things. And I'm telling y'all, I learned some things about David that I didn't know, right? As many sermons as I've heard about David, as many things as I've seen, I learned some things about him that I didn't personally gravitate towards, right? I learned some things about him that made him even more human than I thought him to be before, right? I always knew that he was the good human, right? Because I knew he had flaws, right? And we are aware of the murder. We're aware of the adultery, right? Those are the ones we bring up. We don't mind discussing those. But I've also come to see that there were some things about him that we don't necessarily readily discuss, right? We don't readily discuss that he wasn't necessarily the best father. He was just a man. We don't necessarily discuss that he disobeyed God when it came to his marital living. I know, and that makes it hard. I know it takes a little bit of the shine off of the luster, off of the name. But hear me again, when we can look at these people as real people, I think it helps us with God, see God as exactly who God is. All right. So Miss Monica said there's some people she would like to dig into. So she said Elijah. She said Esther, Elisha. Okay, I see you. So those are some of the folks that that would be great to dive into. And I'll be honest, those folks would be a little bit easier to dive into because their story. And wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hold tight. We'll get there. I got you, Monica. We're gonna look through it someday. I got you. All right. So the first step we said in figuring out how to conduct a character study is simply picking the person, right? Just simply picking the person. Now, after we've selected who it is that we want to study, the next thing we want to do is look for where can we gain the information about who they are, right? So now I told you that. So now let's look at how do we gather the information. So one of the ways, now if you are, I told you we moved recently, so I got a lot of books and boxes, so I can't grab my concordance because I have no idea where it is right now. But a concordance is going to be one of the very first things that is super helpful in getting us the information we need. Why? Because a concordance is going to tell us everywhere where that person has been mentioned, right? So I tell y'all know, I like to kind of share my screen a little bit and work this thing. So now, like I said, I don't have a concordance, but even when we don't have, a physical, there's always electronic, right? So I've told y'all in the past, one of the sites that I like to use when it comes to study called blueletterbible.org, okay? blueletterbible.org. So that's what I have up on my screen right now for you, okay? And what I've already done is I just did a search for David, right? And now he's just a character. So I said, let me just search out David. And what we have and what you'll see is that the concordance is now going to list every place that David's name appears. Now, some of these references, now, especially when you're dealing with a person who may have had a more common name, some of the scriptural references you may find may not be the actual person you're looking for, which is okay, right? You just kind of look to the next thing. But here, as we look through, one of the see, right, is that David pops on the scene really heavy, right, around 1 Samuel 16. But then you'll look, it just keeps riding, right? 16, 17, 18, right? And then you have these sections that can kind of tells you he goes off into 19, 20, right? So first you'll do is just do a search, okay? Now, cool part here is you can actually come to Blue Letter Bible right on the homepage and just type in David. Right? And let's change up text, right? We're going to look in the NIV and we're going to see, okay, where does this David show up? In here, same list, okay? So again, remember what I said. The very first thing we're going to want to do is just do a simple search to say, where is this person found? All right? Are y'all rocking with me? Let me know you're rocking with me. Let me know if we are good on tonight and if this is making sense, okay? Miss Gwen says she uses Blue Letter Bible as well. Yeah, it is super helpful. And I'll get into some of the other things they have on there as well. But the concordance is, like I said, that very first step, right? Because we're going to want to find out where is their story told. So if I'm looking at David, I see that there's going to be information about David all through First and Second Samuel. And so that's just briefly says all through First and Second Samuel, we're going to find information on David. So if I'm doing a character study on David, be where I want to start. Right? I want to start with his story. I want to begin to read through his story. Now, like I told you, some people are going to be longer than others. You're going to have more information than others. So David is going to be all through First and Second Samuel, right? There's going to be references to him in First and Second Kings. There are going to be references to him in Psalms, right? Because he wrote some of them. So we want to dive into those. There also are going to be references to David in the New Testament, right? So we'll also even want to dive into those references to gain a full picture of who David is, right? Of who David was, what his life was like. So here you see references that we see in Matthew. Now, a lot of the references to David that we'll find New Testament wise are going to be referencing his line, right? They're actually going to be references to Jesus because Jesus is a part of the lineage of David, right? So in this, when we see the son of David, right? That's a reference to Jesus actually, but David is included. So remember, as we are gathering information on our study, the one we're studying, then some stuff we're just going to have to leave to the side. Right? Some stuff won't be for us. Now, I haven't forgot about you, Miss Monica. You said three names. Miss Monica said Elijah, Elisha, and Esther. All right. So let's do a quick search on, let's say Elijah, right? We do a quick search. Where does Elijah show up? All right. So Elijah, we can see that it looks like his story starts around 1 Kings 17. Okay. So if we're going to dive into the life of Elijah, we want to start his reading around 1 Kings 17. And you can see that he's got references all the way through 18, 19, right? Into 2 Kings. We still see him there. So we see here that 1st and 2nd Kings is really where the bulk of the life of Elijah is going to be told. Okay. But we can also see that there are Elijah in other scriptures. Okay, so we can see here there's references to Elijah in Ezra. There's references to Elijah in Malachi. There's references here in Matthew and in Mark and throughout the Gospels, Luke, right? So what we'll want to do is we're going to first start our digging in at 1st and 2nd Kings. And we'll read about him in general. And then we'll go to those extra references to see what else do they have to say about those things. Y'all with me? Okay, so now as we can see, Elijah's a lot easier than David, right? There's a lot less on Elijah. So now it'll be easier in terms of gathering information. However, sometimes because there's less information, drawing conclusions may be a little bit harder. Make sense? Right? The more information we have is the more we can kind of tease out and we can get. And sometimes y'all, you doing this thing, you can get all off into the weeds, right? You can get to finding out who the third cousin was and that cousin, had a little land over here in Tish, and then you had another cousin who was over in and right. So you can get into the weeds depending on the level of information. But again, first place we're going to start is we're going to start by reading their story. All right. Now, as you're reading, you're going to be taking notes. Okay. So, question: what am I taking notes on? Anything, everything, right? Whatever you read that tells you the question of who they are. Now, in times past, right, we've talked about studying. And when I talked about studying, we talked about that studying is bringing questions to the table, right? So as you're reading through whoever your study is, whoever your character is, you want to be asking the question, what does this tell me about them? Right now, I'll be honest. I told you, me and my friends, we were digging out David's life, right? So we were in First Samuel. Started off 1 Samuel 16. We made it through. We were rocking out, and then we realized, oh my God, a lot, right? And because it was a group, it was a little bit slower. So we're going just a chapter a week. Sometimes we can get through 2 chapters. But here's the thing: some of the chapters that we read didn't have anything to do with David. Right? They might have been talking about Jonathan, or they may have been talking about Saul. So we skip those, not necessarily skip them, we learn from them, right? Because what those are going to also tell us is they're going to help us with the context, the context, right? So we can read the direct information about David, but here's the thing: reading the story and seeing, oh, well, there was a moment where Jonathan has an altercation with his father about David. Well, that may not speak to exactly us learning about who David was or what God was doing in David's life, but it does help us set the context in which David was living. And how many of you know context is absolutely important, right? Because when we're trying to figure out why a person did what they did or why they made the decision they made, knowing what they have going on is very important. Now, this is often the place, right, when people get to reading text messages or reading our story or looking at us from the outside. Sometimes they'll judge us based on our decisions without knowing the context, right? And we get upset because we're like, no. You understand the context, understand everything that was going into the decision I made, and then you may not judge me the way you judged me before. Well, this is our opportunity to do that very same thing. Right? This is an opportunity to take off the lens of what everyone has told you. Right? This is your opportunity to take off the preconceived notions that we've had from all the sermons we've ever heard. Nothing wrong with it. But when we're studying, the idea is that we want to grab and hold on to the information for ourselves. Right? So in this effort, we look to say, what do I know? How do I set this context, right? What is the outside, the underlying story that they're living in? Because the underlying story speaks volumes about who God is. The underlying story speaks volumes about what their choices were, what their decisions were. It speaks to what their mindset was. It speaks to what their emotional state was, which all plays a part. Because again, we're looking to get to the real person so that we can get a good sense of identifying with who this is and how God moves, right? Because remember, the end goal is not just to learn about the person, but the end goal is then to get a better understanding of how God interacts with humanity and how then he interacts with me, right? Okay. So when you find it, read it. Now, in this case, like I said, we're looking at Elijah. We've got a little bit less information, right? And so, matter of fact, let's just look at it, right? I'm gonna jump back in, share my screen again. Share my screen again, and then we will jump into one of these scriptures really quick to take a look, okay? Is this helpful so far, y'all? Is this helpful? Are y'all understanding, the reason why, one, the reason why it's important, but two, is it helpful in terms of just being able to adapt and think through, what I'm saying, what you want to do next in your own study time? Let me know. All right, I am getting some yeses, so I'll keep going. All right. Make it all right to keep going, okay? All right, so we see that Elijah's story jumps off at 1 Kings 17, right? So roll with me on over to 1 Kings 17. That's what we're just going to do, right? We're just going to go on over and see what's happening. All right, so we roll over and we just simply begin to see what's happening. Now, we pick up and we're introduced to Elijah here. And it says, now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word." Stop. Just based on that verse, what is it that we've learned about Elijah? Yes, I'm asking, so I'm asking y'all to type it in, right? What is it that we've learned about Elijah in just one verse? Right? Because remember, as we're reading, the question is, we're not just reading to see what happened in the story, but we're now reading to see who is this person, right? Since we got to ask questions. So, like I said, simple question is, what does this tell me about him, right? Y'all tell me, verse 1, what does it tell me about Elijah, right? What does verse 1 tell me about who he is, about the person he is, about the real nature of his life? What does it tell me? Not everybody at once, I know. And I know it's a little bit of a delay on there too. So I'm rocking with you. But tell me, right? It says, "Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, I serve, there will neither be dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." Now we learned some really good things right here about it. But what do we learn? I want y'all to come on, talk with me. Talk with me. What do we learn? Now, remember, when we're trying to gather information, we're gathering information on the person. So we want to, find out who they are. We want to find out where they're from. We want to find out who the mama is, who the daddy is, right? We want to find out what their likes are, what they don't like. What is their occupation? What do they do for fun? Right? These are all the normal things that, as we investigate a person, we'll be looking for. So we don't want to change that idea or that thought process, right? We're going to want to look for those very same things in the characters that we're studying. So, right here, what is it telling me, y'all? We still live? Y'all still with me? Come on, no wrong answers, no wrong answers. Y'all already know that. Come on. What is verse 1? What's something that we learn about the person of Elijah in verse 1? Now, I'm gonna tell y'all, if y'all make me go over time because y'all quiet, I'm gonna tell Pastor D it was the people. Now, come on. All right. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Miss Monica jumped in. All right. She says, he's a servant of the Lord from Tishbe, speaks with authority. Beautiful. Right? Again, sometimes observations are super simple, but that's what we learn. He's from Tishbe. Now, I don't really know where Tishbe is, right? But it's in Gilead. So at this point is when like I told you, sometimes you got to break out a map. Sometimes you got to break out extra things. And this is where you do that, right? You're like, okay, he's from Tishbe. He's a Tishbite from Gilead. Why is that important? It may or not be. May or not be. Okay, he said, I can't see it that good. I see you, Miss Reaper. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can. There we go. Hopefully that's better for us. All right. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay. So he's a servant, yes. He's from Tishbe, yes. And he speaks with authority. Yes. Beautiful, right? This speaks to, one, where he's from. It talks about who he is a little bit, right? Because if he's going to speak with authority, then that tells me there's some connection, right? Like none of us are going to speak with authority about who God is without some connectivity to God, right? So it tells me that he's in relationship with him. But now he announced that himself, right? Because he says, I serve him. So he's already announced that he's in relationship with him. Now, think about also then, what else do we know, right? Now, we also, remember I said we want to gather information as though we know nothing, right? But we do know some things. So don't throw away what you already know, right? So one of the things we know, we've heard it said, he's a prophet. Okay, so he is a prophet, so that's why he's speaking on behalf of God. So now we kind of get an idea of his occupation, right? Whether it's occupation or office or calling, whatever verbiage you want to use, we got a sense, right, that he's a prophet. His next sense is we know where he's from. We know that he's from Tishbe, right? And we know, as Miss Monica says, that he speaks with authority. Cool. Note that, right? That's what we'll do. We'll know who he is. We'll know what he has going on. Now, we already find him in action. So we're not necessarily getting historical context on mother, father, what his upbringing like, which is okay. Okay. Again, we're not looking to gain what's not there, but we do want to gain as much as possible of what's there. Okay. So let me jump back over there. So it says that he's from Tishbe. The word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave the eastward. So now, and Pastor D actually went over this in their sermon. So we're not going to hang in there too tough, right? I don't need to go over every verse and everything. So this is the story, right? Him going against the prophets of Baal, him going to the brook, and he's being fed by the ravens. So now we see here in that story, if we think about it, right? What does that tell us, Elijah? Well, that tells us that not only is he a prophet, not only is he speaking for God, but he also follows God, right? But context, right? When we're learning about who Jezebel was and the prophets of Baal, what we're also learning is that he was living in a dangerous time. Right. This is why God has to guide him and send him to the brook by Kerith and feed him. Right. Because there is some danger at hand. So now, what does it also tell us if we know that he's living in a dangerous time and he's willing to stand up for God in dangerous times? What does that tell us about who he is? What does that tell us possibly about his character? What does that tell us about his nature? Come on, somebody talk to me. What does that tell us about the kind of person we're dealing with when we're dealing with Elijah? Right? Remember what I said. If we're going to do these studies, it's about asking other simple, different kinds of questions, right? Not just what happened, but what does it tell me about who he is, right? What does his response tell us? What is his ability or desire to go up to the king Ahab and tell him that there's going to be no rain? What does that tell us about who he is? What does it tell us that when the prophets of Baal came and they were cutting themselves, that he was willing to stand alone? What does that say about the type of person Elijah is? Come on, talk to me, y'all. Talk to me. Talk with me. Talk with me. Right? Because that's where we're at. Those are the questions we're asking. What kind of person? Who are we dealing with? Right? What's happening? And we're going to use what's happening to tell us who he is. I like that, Miss Gwen. Miss Gwen says that Elijah was loyal to God. I like it. I like it. All right. Miss Monica says he wasn't afraid to lose life for the glorification of God. That's important. That's real important. All right. Mr. Kim says that he was strong and confident. Now, I like it. Now, I'm going to come back to that strong and confident, Mr. Kim, because I like that. I like what you said, but I also like what we're going to see here in a minute. Now, y'all got to know, right? I didn't necessarily look into Elijah before, but we're going to dig into it together, right? But I like what you said because I think, yeah, I think it's going to serve us well. All right, I'm coming. So these are the things we see, right? His willingness to serve God, his willingness to stand up to Ahab, his willingness to speak truth in the face of adversity, his willingness to go against others tells us that he wasn't a punk, right? He was no punk. He was with God, right? He was sold out. He was connected. He was linked up. He was loyal. He wasn't backing down. He wasn't afraid, right? He wasn't afraid. And to the point where he was willing to put his life on the line, right? He was willing to put his life on the line. Now, give me 1 second, because I hear you, Holy Spirit. We're going to rock it. Okay. So now, but now that's 1 Kings 17, right? But then roll over to roll over to 1 Kings 19. Roll over to 1 Kings 19. Yeah, 19 verse 2. All right. 1 Kings 19 verse 2. Now, this is where, remember what I said. We don't want to over spiritualize or overemphasize good good traits and not with the negative ones. Okay. And that's one of the things that I think a good character study will definitely help us with. All right. All right. So beginning at verse 2, right? Remember, we learned that he went to Ahab, he confronted him. Now in verse 2, though, right? We're seeing that he's been confronted, but now he's kind of on the run. And 19:2 says, so Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them. Now, one of them is, she's talking about those four other prophets, right? Who the prophets of Baal, the ones who died, the ones who he has killed, right? Because now when they had their confrontation on the mountain, right, and the prophets of Baal lost, he went ahead and took their lives, right? So something else that tells me is that there is a sense of physical strength to Elijah, right? Like he's not just, he isn't just strong in character, but there is some physicality that is needed, because in order for you to kill 400 cats, you can't be weak, right? And you can't be squeamish, right? He's not afraid of confrontation. But something interesting pops up here in verse 3. It says in verse 3, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there. While he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. All right, all right. Now, here's the thing. Remember, we said that one of the things we learned from him was that he was strong, confident, courageous even, right? Because he was willing to go to the king. He was willing to stand up to the prophets of Baal. But then we find him here afraid. This is what I love, right? Because the scriptures don't just give us the good, but they tell us the real. So what do we learn about Elijah here? That he's a real person, y'all, right? That you can win victories and still have fear because he's human, right? His life still matters to him, and losing it is important to him. Right? So can we be sold out? Can we be committed? Can we be loyal and still fear for our lives? Absolutely. Right? This is what we learn now. And here's the thing about that. Because again, remember I said we want to learn about the person so that we can also see what their life, their real life, tells us about God. So my question to you would be, based on the pieces of information we've already just gathered about who Elijah is, right? What does it tell you about God? Because remember, I said we're gonna dive in. Now, when you're talking about a character study, we dive in and we ask all kind of questions. So we ask who they are, we ask where they're from, we ask what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Right? We're asking what is it that they believe? What's their thoughts? What's their feelings? We want to dig into who they are, ultimately to find out how God interacts with them. But so I'm kind of skipping ahead, right? So you know, it will be a lot more digging in at this point, but I am skipping ahead to ask this question: what does what we know about him thus far tell us about who God is? Now, I know that's a little bit deeper of a question, but I need y'all to think with me, right? Because if we've discovered that he's confident, he's courageous, he's strong, he is committed, he is loyal, but he's also fearful, right? That he also struggles with that same sense of confidence, right? Because we got him killing 400 men and priests, and then in the next verse, at the word of the queen, he's on the run. Right? So what does that say about God? Now I'm gonna let y'all draw some conclusions. I got a couple, but I want y'all to chime in with me. All right. Okay, I like that, Ms. Monica. Ms. Monica says that we are nothing without him. That's good. That's good, right? Because in this instance, his capacity to achieve was at its height based on his connection to God, right? Capacity to achieve is going to be we're going to achieve the most and do the most if we remain connected. So I like that, right? That we without God. But what else does it tell us? Come on, y'all. What else does it tell us about God? Yep, and we're doing good on time. Amen. What does it tell us about God, Joe? Right? Think about this. So let me ask it this way. The fact that God would use him when he's on top, protect him, and then even in his fear, he doesn't throw him away. Matter of fact, maybe I got to read a little further, right? Let's read a little further. So remember, we said in verse 4, he says, "Yo, I have had enough. Take my life, right? I am no better than ancestors." Then it says, the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him. So he came, he looked around, said, the angel of the Lord came down. He had fallen asleep. Angel of the Lord pops up and says, get up and eat. Then we got the angel of the Lord time, right? Yo, pop up, get up and eat, right? And then it goes on to say that the Lord, then it comes to him and he says, I am very zealous for the Lord God. All lights have rejected your covenant. So this is Elijah talking to God, and God's response to him. He says, and in his dissertation of conversation with God, Elijah says, I am the only one left. Now they are trying to kill me. And God's response, he says, go out, stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and stood in the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? All right. So come on. What does interaction tell us about God and who God is to? I like it. All right. I see Prophetess Benita says, it tells us that God will fight your battles when you obey. I like it. It says, be strong in the Lord, and he, God, will make you strong. I like that, right? So here it is that is telling us that God will give us strength when we're weak, right? Or at least let's start with, in his weakness, God gave Elijah strength. Right? In his weakness, God gave Elijah strength. And Miss Anita says that it tells us that God is merciful and compassionate towards him. I like that. I like that because here it is that even though he had just done a lot, and now God doesn't come chastising him for his fear, right? God doesn't come like, and we've seen God in other places pop up like, oh, you of little faith. But he doesn't come to Elijah that way, right? So that's good that we can see that he's merciful and passionate. Janelle says that God is faithful and will see you through. I'm with you, right? Because here it is that he stood up for God, and now he's on the run because of that stance, right? Because of that stance, he's now on the run. That stance has put his life in jeopardy, and now he's on the run. But God's got his back the whole time, right? Never left him. So that's dope. I love it. And then Ms. Gwen says that God is still faithful to Elijah. He's a protector and his strength. Absolutely. Right? So here it is. We get to see the reality of Elijah's life, right? We get a chance to see him win, right? We get a chance to see him have a huge win, but then we also get a chance to see after that win how fear takes over. Right. And now he's on the run. But even in those moments, God is with him. Right. And even if we look at that story about that God wasn't in the earthquake, he wasn't in the fire, he was in the whisper. Right. So could it be that what he's saying is, look at, they make grandstands, right? They can do all the grandstanding they want. Because don't forget, when they 400 of them, they cutting themselves, hollering out. They're making loud, clamorous, they're being boisterous, right? They're being boastful. Even Jezebel now in her arrogance says to him, yo, I'm going to make you like one of them. Because your display of who your God was hasn't convinced me. She still felt like she had more power than he did. So here it is that he is fearful, and God is showing him something. Yo, forget all the noise. Forget all the big shows of demonstration and what people think is power. Forget all that. I'm hearing the whisper. So even if they like to make a lot of noise, they're not as powerful as me. Right? So this is what we get a chance to see about God in his interaction with Elijah. Okay. Now, I told you, I'm just kind of giving us an overview of how we do this thing. Okay. So now, after you've dug into the person, right? After you've had a chance to read through the stories that talk about them, right? We take notes, right? We put our notes together. We write out and we say, okay, this is what I've learned about the person first, right? We're learning about the person first. So these are the things I've learned about this person. And again, in this case, we wouldn't just stop with First and Second Kings, right? We would dive into whatever else the scriptures have to say, wherever other spaces Elijah's name was mentioned, we would want to see that. Right? Because we're going to want to get the information of how did he interact with Elisha, right? Because Elisha, that story about him and Elisha is coming up, right? So he gets a mentor underneath him. So how does he treat the mentor? Right? That's important because that's going to also speak more about who he is, his character, how he develops, how we can look at that as an example, maybe, of how we develop people. Because here's the thing, we're always going to learn from the life of the person. We will either learn what to do or what not to do. Right? So we'll look at it and we'll investigate it. So dope. So we would read everything we can gather on Elijah, right? Or whoever the person is that we're studying. We read whatever we can, investigate whatever we can, write down, make notes of what we've learned. So in this case, prophet, we've learned he's a Tishbite. We've learned that he has had successes and he's had fears. Right? We learned that he's been on the run, running from his life. And even in those moments, God protected him. These are all the things that we write down, we learn. And then we ask, and in our observation, what we try to do is give or highlight the top, say, 8 to 10 things that summarize this person's life, right? We understand that we can't summarize a whole person's life in just 7 or 8 statements. I get it. But we do what we can to kind of not only gather the information, but organize it. That's what I'm looking for, right? We want to make sure that we organize the information we've gathered, because as we organize it, we get a chance to understand what it is that we're seeing and what it is that we're learning. All right, y'all rocking with me? So we read everything we can. We notate whatever we can. And then now we go through our notes and we summarize, right? We go through and we summarize, well, this is what I've learned about Elijah. This is who he was. This is what he came to. And then now you can take those observations and maybe even boil them down into 1 or 2 sentences, right? That speak to why is this person here? Right? Like, what makes it significant that they are in the text? Right? What did they do? What did they say? What did they accomplish? What did they learn? Right? We want to write that down because this is why they're in the text. And then after we've simply observed, now hear me, remember, we want to observe good and bad, positive and negative. We want the strengths and weaknesses and write them down. Now, I know that sometimes discovering those weaknesses is going to dull the luster and the shine on the person and who we thought they were. I know for some of this, it will. Okay. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Right. Because and I've said this before, but I've learned that sometimes we can stay on the good too much. Right. We've got to see everything about them. Now, here's the beautiful part about it as well, right? One of the things that you'll recognize is as the story is unfolding, we get to see the good, bad, and the ugly, right? But sometimes as the story is retold in text, the bad is left out, right? So David, when we get to see in David's life, right, through 1st and 2nd Samuel, Kings, and we see his writings in Psalms, when we hear of him in Hebrews, or when we hear of him in the New Testament, it's just glowing. It's just great remarks, but we don't get to hear the poor father, right? We don't necessarily hear the poor father, or we don't hear the murderer, or we don't hear of the adulterer. We hear of the man who's the one who's a man after God's own heart. We hear of him being a great and mighty king, but he was also all of those other things. But what that should tell us, or where we should take solace, or where we can gain some strength and some comfort, is that when God looks back at our lives, right? This is why we, in the retelling, some of the bad moments are left out. Because when God is looking back at our lives, he understands what we've done wrong, but he highlights where we followed. He highlights how we've blessed, how we have loved him, how we have honored him, even in spite of falling short. Why? Because he's clear that all of us are going to fall short. Romans 3:23. So he's clear on that. But he's looking for those who would love him. He's looking for those who would serve him. And when we get to coming into the faith, then now we get the sense and the understanding that now redemption takes away where I've been lacking. Redemption covers all of the faults. The blood of Jesus washes over, and his righteousness becomes mine, so that I can be seen in the eyes of God as a child of God. Right? So that's also good news and helps us to see God in an even greater way. But it doesn't mean that we do away with what they didn't do right. Right? I need to keep intact all of the failures. I need to keep intact all of their shortcomings, because I got a ton. And I need to be able to see how God is going to deal with my shortcomings, how God is going to help to redeem those, and how he's going to help to make those right in the end. I need that. Some of y'all don't need it because y'all don't have that many. I got way too many to count. So I need a few people who also got a track record. All right. So that's why we do, as we're observing, don't be fearful to, or don't shy away from dealing with their mess. Please don't, because then we'll miss some of the greatest pieces. All right. So we said, first, we pick the person we want to study. Second, we look and gather all the reading that we can, all the stories in the Bible, everything we can see, we read it and we go through it. We make our observations. Now, in this, we may also need some other resources, okay? And those other resources, again, why I tell you, I definitely dig blueletterbible.org, because in this space, we also get a chance, not only, let me make this a little smaller, y'all. Try to make this so we can still see. But we get a chance to dig into what other people have also said, right? So this is where you can dive into other commentaries, right? The research of other historians, the research of other theologians who've also dug into this person's life. Now they are going, now one of my favorite is good, and mainly just because I own the set of books on it too. But Matthew Henry, Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown are some they're old school commentaries, that have stood the test of time, y'all. So here you can always dive in and say, okay, what is Matthew Henry, right? What does he have to say? Now he's going to dive in, and here's where we'll kind of gain some other information that we may not have had, right? We may gain some cultural context that we may not have had before. We may gain some historical context that we may not have had before. And this is what we want to do, y'all. We want to take what the scriptures tell us, decipher all of it, and then now draw some conclusions, gain some thoughts. But then now let's go to what other people have seen, right? Go to what other people have understood and find out what their investigations and their information, one, how does that line up to some of the conclusions that I've already come to, right? And here's the beautiful part why I love doing it this way. Because a lot of times you'll go back to reading these commentaries, you'll go back to reading these old school theologians, and you'll realize, hey, what I was thinking is what they said. And it just lets you know that you're on the right track, that you're going down the right pathway. You don't necessarily want to lean on them for all your information, but you do want them to help you confirm what you're looking at. All right. So after you've kind of taken your notes, you've gone through, delineate things out. Now let's go into some extra reading. Let's go into some extra history. Let's find out a little bit more. Okay. And then now, after we've done that and we filled out our understanding of the person and what they're doing and how they've moved. And now we come to the final question. Okay, well, what does this mean now? And sorry, we've also then asked the question, okay, what does their life and their interaction with God tell me about God? Okay. Now, after we've asked those questions, we now come to what I think is one of the final questions, right? And this is going to be the question that we don't necessarily ask ourselves, but this is what we ask Holy Spirit. We say, okay, you've shown me a great deal of who they are, what they were thinking, how they reacted, how they responded. Now, what about them? What is it about what you've shown me that I need to apply to me? Because not everything is going to be for me. But what you've shown me, what part of what you've shown me is for me? What part of what you've shown me should I adopt? What part of what you've shown me says that how I'm living is not, you need me to take out some things, or you might need me to add some things, right? Now we begin to use their life to then tell us and inform us how it is that we live. Because again, I've said this many times, but the idea of study is not just to get smart. Right? The idea of study is not just to sound wise and to have a bunch of information to spew at people. The reason why we study is so that we can live. Right? We study so that the word takes shape in us. We study so that we can remove out of us what God hates, and we can start to plug in all the things that God loves, right? It is through his word that we are going to become sanctified. It is through his word that we're going to gain strength. It's through his word, right? So that's why it's important that we're digging into his word, but it's also important why we look at the people in the text. Because again, we have to know, remember, and believe they're real people, y'all. None of them are robots, right? So nothing that they went through was easy for them, right? Just like we go through things on a daily basis. Every day we got to get up and we wash up and we go to work and we fend for we try to feed our families. We try to provide a space to live. They went through all of that. Right? Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that they had that Elijah still had to figure out how he was going to eat every day. Right? That Peter and Paul had to figure out where they were going to stay when they went from town to town. Right? Let's not forget that they still had real life happening. So the stories that we read and the things that we recognize about their interactions with God are not in a vacuum. Just like our interactions with God are not in a vacuum, right? They're real people, and we want to see them that way. Because this is my belief, right? Because if we can see real people, then we can understand a real God. And then we can live real Christian lives. That's it. All right. So I hope this was helpful. And I feel like I'm missing some things. I apologize. My other notes are on my other computer downstairs, and I feel like I'm missing something. But just to recap, right? How do we do a character study? First things first, we choose who we want to read. Second thing is we then go and find where they exist in the Bible. So if you've got a physical concordance, you can look their name up and it'll give you every scripture reference for them. If you don't, I told y'all I like blueletterbible.org, or go to biblegateway.com, or go wherever, type in a name and watch the list of scriptures pop up. So then we now go through those scriptures. We dig into them. We read them. We ask them questions. We seek to understand. And we're not just reading as we've read in times past, but now we're asking questions specifically about this person, right? So we're trying to figure out, what does their actions, their words, their deeds, what does it tell us about who they are and how they're living and what they have going on? And then after we've gathered that information, right, we write it out. We give a good, concise understanding of what we've learned. And then from there, we say, okay, based on what I've learned about them, what does that tell me about God? Right? And then now we can flesh that out, right? We dig that out. We understand that. And then now, once we understand what is told there, what we've learned about them, what we've learned about God, now we say, okay, Holy Spirit, based on all of this, what do I apply to me? What do I apply to me, and how do I become a better steward of life that God has given? That's it, right? And then now you'll have a greater relationship with not only the person, but you'll also have a greater relationship with your word. And that relationship is going to boil over. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's one thing I did forget to say, that as we're doing those extra readings, right? The commentaries or the maps or whatever it is, you can also look up some other biblical characters who were alive at the same time, right? See what their interactions may have been with others. So one of the things we saw with Elijah was he was alive at the same time as Obadiah, right? Obadiah is another prophet. So we can always go over to Obadiah's life. Okay, what was Obadiah happening? So now that helps us to just flesh out the full scene of what's happening, right? Because we may and one of the things we'll learn, like one of the things, Nehemiah. So the book of Nehemiah and the story of Nehemiah is happening right around the same time as the book of Ezra, right? They're just coming at the same thing from two different angles. So now that just helps us to build greater context, right? If we can figure out who else is alive, what else is happening, we may find more context around the story over here. So just if you're reading Nehemiah, hop on over to Ezra. You'll get a better sense of what Nehemiah is facing, because Ezra is facing the exact same thing. All right, so that's part of it, right? I almost forgot to say that. So yes, so now once we've done all this and we've dug it out, I guarantee you're going to look up and be like, I know more. I feel better. I feel stronger. I feel more alive, right? Why? Because the word is alive and you're learning about those who were alive and how the spirit of the living God flowed through them and how that same spirit connects us to them. Because that's the thread, y'all. God is the thread between us all. Right? So I'm connected to David. I'm connected to Elijah. You're connected to Esther. You're connected to James and John and Peter and Paul. We are all connected, and the common thread is God. All right? So that's it, y'all. That's it for tonight. I hope that this blessed you. I hope this was helpful, because we have to be better stewards. We just have to be better stewards, right? And studying is a part of that. So I hope this was helpful for y'all tonight. I appreciate you guys sticking with us, hanging in through the whole thing. So we are ending right on time, as I should have. God bless. I appreciate it. I love it. And I thank you. So tonight, as we get ready to get out of here, it is always, as we always have, an opportunity to give. If you want to sow a seed into the word, if this blessed you and this helps you, if you feel like it's going to help you kind of stick in there, right? Grind out a little bit longer thing, y'all. I'll be honest. It gets hard some days. And some days we need these kind of reminders. And I'm telling you, when I was doing that study through the life of David with my friends, like, it helped me in ways I could have never imagined. Right? I thought I was just embarking on a thing with a couple homeboys. Right? But it became a living thing, week in and week out, that blessed my life, and it helped me in the moments where I needed the help the most, and I didn't know it. But God has that capacity and the ability to do that for you. Okay, so study as you're studying, and you might be, you might want to pick up on Elijah, read through it, but I guarantee you, it's because it's a living thing, it's going to speak to some things right where you are. And it's going to help you along your journey. It's going to help you grow stronger. It's going to help you grow wiser. It's going to help you become more faithful and more committed. And this is what we want to do. All right. So I love you. I love y'all. And just as before I get up out of here, this week, we've got online prayer tomorrow, Thursday, noon prayer on Zoom. If you don't know, you can always hit up the office to get the information to the Zoom link. And if you need to hit us up, you already know we're here. Facebook, YouTube, KLM Church GR. Saturday, we are in the building, 8 a.m. for prayer. Be there. Fellas, I keep telling y'all every time, I'm looking for y'all. Right? I'm looking for a couple more fellas to keep joining me. Keep joining me. There's brothers there, but I want to see some more. I love our ladies, but I like, don't say anything, but I like y'all real special. Like I got a special affinity for y'all. So I like to see y'all. Y'all come on out. All right. And so that's Saturday, 8 a.m. We are in the building. And then Sunday, y'all already know, we are in the house worshiping God and trying to show him off to the world. So Sunday morning, 11 o'clock, 2317 Kalamazoo Avenue Southeast, KLM Church GR. We're in the building honoring and worshiping our God. So if you want to join us, and you can join us, then come on in and worship with us. And I can't wait to see what God continues to do and how he continues to move. So that's it, y'all. I love y'all. I'll appreciate y'all for hanging in there with us. Hey fam, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I lost our signal, but we are still here. So listen, I just want to say good night to y'all. I appreciate you tuning in tonight. And I'm sorry we had to end this way, but I'm glad. Look, the devil can't stop us. We got it all out tonight. So that's it. I love y'all. You all have a wonderful evening. See you on Saturday. Peace.